The secretary will read the order.
Debate on vote number 34, Mineral Resources and Energy Appropriation Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. The Honorable Minister.
Honorable House Chairperson, in absentia, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, Deputy President Paul Mashatile in absentia, Deputy Ministers present here, Honorable Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Dr. Nobu Kabane, Honorable members of the National Assembly, Director General DMRE Jacob Mpele and the team DMRE, chairperson of CEO and CEOs of state-owned enterprises, captains of the industry, ladies and gentlemen. Over this medium-term expenditure framework of the current administration, with 2023 being the last full year, a confluence of domestic and global factors impacted on the performance of both mining and energy. Notwithstanding the headwinds, we remain steadfast in setting objectives that our department should meet to realize this government agenda. In our program to ensure universal access to electricity for poor and indigent, we aim to connect 917,000 households to the grid. Today, 673,946 households, 673,946 households are connected to the grid. The remainder of 243,054 will be connected in this financial year. This achievement brings us ever more close to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 7 now. And I must emphasize that we have been given a number of advices in this regard. One of those was that we should not be connecting more people because there's a shortage of electricity. And our view is that connectivity and universal access to electricity is necessary. It can't wait for the grid. We must deal with the grid problem, but connect our people. In line with the reform of electricity sector called for by the president, we've amended the Electricity Regulation Act to enable the creation of the transmission system operator. And the legislation before the House, we appeal to members to speedily and table it for discussion and conclusion. That is establishing transmission as a market and a wheeler of energy. Coupled with the intention to create competitive supply and demand electricity market, the ANC government has created a green economy through the risk mitigation independent power producer procurement program and the renewable energy independent power producer procurement program. We've procured a total of 7,760 megawatts through the bid window 456, a total of 2,130 megawatts are connected to the grid, a total of 150 megawatts and 784 megawatts are envisaged to be operationalized in November 2023 and August 2024 respectively. Notable, a single most challenge we face to address the energy crisis is the grid unavailability. That is beginning to be the problem because you can increase the generation, But if there is no grid capacity, the impact is not the same. So we must pay attention to the grid capacity. Notably, the single most challenge we face to address energy is grid availability. For instance, 3,200 megawatts wind capacity of the 4,200 megawatts procured in bid window 6 could not be allocated due to grid unavailability, as the IPP office notes. Grid availability is critical to secure electricity supply in the future. It impacts not only on the public procurement program, but also on the private embedded generation initiative. We've removed the ceiling on embedded generation, but if there's no grid window, the impact is going to be minimal. In our efforts to narrow the electricity supply and demand gap, the integrated resource plan, which is our blueprint policy for electricity generation, is currently under review. We intend to present the draft to the cabinet in the second quarter of the financial year. I know, Honorable Melam, we said March, and I'm telling you now upfront, it will be second quarter of this year, because we are moving thoroughly. We try to bring a revised IRP that is not just a paper and cut and paste. Whilst this review is underway, we will continue to procure additional electricity informed by the existing policy. Accordingly, in this financial year, we'll procure the following additional generation capacity. Bid window 7 and bid window 8 will give us 5,000 megawatts each. That means a total of 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. And the request for proposals for the procurement of this capacity will be issued in the market the second and fourth quarter of this financial year, respectively. Second quarter, bid window 7. Fourth quarter, bid window 8. In the second and fourth quarter of this financial year, we'll issue the request for proposal for the procurement of battery storage with the capacity total to 1,230 megawatts. In the second quarter, we'll issue a request for the procurement of gas to power, totaling to 3,000 megawatts. In the fourth quarter, we'll also issue a request for proposal for the procurement of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear energy. We need all that energy to ensure that as we roll out our renewable energy, we also roll out base load energy. House Chairperson, the mining industry contributes to the gross domestic product Whilst production declined, the value of production registered 1.18 trillion in 2022, up from 1.1 trillion. On the back of a strong global demand, the sector created 23,552 jobs between June 2021 and December 2022, resulting in the overall employment of 472,088 workers. So, in other words, despite the headwinds, this industry has not declined, it has created more jobs. I remember, I'm making this point because when we reported a decline in the number of fatalities, and somebody intimated that it should be because there is fewer workers in the industry. There are no fewer workers in the industry. Workers in the industry are more by 23,552, and therefore those facts don't reconcile. According to South African Revenue Services, the mining sector contributed 89 billion rand in corporate tax in 2021-22 financial year. A further contribution of the mining industry to the country's revenue through royalties stood at 28.45 billion in the same period, keeping its percentage contribution to the GDP to 7.53. This is clear indication that mining remains a strong pillar of our economy. As highlighted in the latest Fraser Institute survey that placed South Africa in the worst position in recent memory, Mining would contribute even better to the economy if the binding constraints of electricity, load shedding, rail and port system bottlenecks were urgently resolved. According to the survey, South Africa is in the bottom quartile of the investment attractiveness index. And our view is we had issues last year, we have no issue now, because we know that load shedding is a reality. We know that rail and port bottlenecks are a reality. And therefore, attractiveness requires us to address those weaknesses. One of the indices highlighted in the Fraser Institute survey is the transparency of the licensing system. To this end, we have collaboration with the State Information Technology Agency, SITA, initiated the procurement process of licensing system with integrity. The bid adjudication process is underway and will be finalized in July 2023. 6 billion of Exaro in fraud play, in Grootegeluk, no. Country's revenue, true royalties, okay. I've skipped something. Please help me, Honorable Mailer, please. Now, mining and energy have also seen some tailwinds with sizable investments. To this end, the department is following on the implementation of 56 investment commitments, which were pledged in the mining and energy sector at the annual investment conference, amounting to 397 billion rand. Among them, 16.5 billion rand was pledged by DBS at Venetia, 6 billion rand by Exaro in Grootegeluk, 636 million rand by Impala in Two Rivers, 175 million by in Steelport, Vanadium. Now, these pledged investments reinforced our assertion that mining is a sunrise industry, ready to bolster our economy for year to year. So, despite the fact that people may raise issues in terms of the investment, we've been listening to the articulation of the US ambassador. We've listened to some investors in London. We've listened to the banking sector, all of them trying to pour cold water on the investment environment in South Africa. We have a responsibility to ensure that we continue to stand and actually withstand all the efforts to downgrade our investment. On the energy sector, the lifting of threshold on embedded generation has unleashed green shoots. For example, Goldfields investment in 50 megawatt Volvo plant on their South Tip mine with the investment of 715 million rand. This power plant can supply the mine and potential access power ready to be sold to the grid, thus creating a prosumer market which will help close the supply and demand gap. That talks to the reality that despite the fact that in 2021-22, mining production declined by 9.9%, Goldfields registered an increase of 10%. It means supplementing your own energy supply can contribute to better production. The Seriti Green, a 4 billion commitment of 155 megawatts wind energy facility. This is a clear demonstration that our target interventions are beginning to deliver green shoots in addressing electricity challenges that the country faces. In 2022, we gazetted the exploration strategy, which aims to ensure that we attract at least 5% of global exploration spend in 2025. To give effect to this drive, the implementation of this strategy, we have approached and negotiated with IDC, Industrial Development Corporation, on the establishment of an exploration fund for junior miners, which is to be concluded by end of June 2023. In its first phase, the fund will consist of a combined investment of 500 million rand from DMRE and IDC. that money is intended to help emerging miners to do exploration. It's quite an expensive exercise because you are gambling, you don't know if there is a mineral. The social license to mine in communities is an important principle, also included in the mining charter. In this regard, mining houses working with the communities and municipalities have contributed towards creating capabilities which are part of the national development by building health and education infrastructure, for example. Let me give you a few examples. Waterloo Hills Primary and High School in the Northwest was donated by a mining company. J.S. Kenjana School in Eastern Cape in Tuja was donated by a mining company. Rockdale Clinic Center in Pumalanga, Bukamuso Water and Sanitation Project in Northwest, Riarata Primary School in the Northwest. Those are but few examples, there are many of them. Social labor plan is beginning to deliver impactful projects instead of delivering small projects in communities. Impactful projects that can benefit more people. We're beginning to see that. Last weekend, we handing over a social plan project of food production in Rustenburg. So we'll continue doing so because mines must not be known to be leaving holes on the ground. Mines must begin to change the reputation of the mining industry in communities. Health and safety continue to register incremental improvement of 49 fatalities recorded in 2022, were the lowest ever on record, 49 fatalities. There is progress on the reported occupational diseases with a drop from 2013 in 2020 to 1,924 in 2021. Now, more than ever, we must double our efforts to achieve our zero harm goal. We must consolidate gains made through partnership with our social partners. Health and safety is an area where there can be no conflict or antagonistic relation between the employer and workers, because it is about lives of people. House Chairperson, the demand for liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, has doubled in the last 10 years and is poised to grow more. LPG can reduce demand on electricity during peak hours, thereby minimize the severity of load shedding. We wish to encourage consumers to use this efficient source of energy for space heating. It's quite important, and for cooking. In line with the country's ocean economy agenda, we work hard to attract investment on oil and gas sector and bringing community on board to see the benefit from this for development 2022. In 2022, we undertook a consultation in 7 kingdoms in the Eastern Cape and Western Cape. We also visited Northern Cape, and the consultation helped us to appreciate a real and prevailing sentiment about oil and gas development. These sit in contrast to lobby groups, mostly foreign funded. I'm emphasizing this, that many of the people who are running anti-development NGOs are foreign funded, and they block development in our country. To me, I don't think the issue is either climate change or development. It's both. You do development with responsibility, but you don't block development. I was quite excited when I heard Honorable Lorima taking an interest in the development in Namibia. And the only thing that he didn't mention was that some of the companies that are making discoveries in Namibia were chased away here because we want to be a small, clean space in a world that is developing. 3 discoveries of oil has been made in Namibia. Yeah, 3. They are looking for the 4th. They have discovered 3 now. And they are actually drilling 10 wells of oil. And that is progress. In our side, where those deposits are stretching, We can't because we've given environmentalists a veto power over development. It's not right. It's something that we must look at. We must amend our legislation if need be, because we must pursue development. The protected litigation emanating adversely impairs our economic development. For example, ENI, which was doing exploration in the KZN coastline, have left us because they were taken to court for 7 times, and they went to Cote d'Ivoire and discovered huge oil deposits. That's what happens. Richard Swedberg argues in his articulation of the role of law in the economic sociology of capitalism and the development of growth in the market. Law is typically part of political machinery. One reason for this is that law introduces extra layer between political decision and their execution. The state can influence the economy through regulation. That's what he writes. Therefore, ours cannot be mere regulatory framework that reverses the gains of our hard-won liberty, where they describe by near as under transformative change, the old rules and procedures frequently become instead source of oppositional norms. Following the tabling of the upstream petroleum resources development bill in Parliament, Cabinet approved the merger of iGas, Petro SA, and SFF to form South African National Petroleum Company. The establishment of the South African National Petroleum Company will give effect to the provision enshrined in the said bill for the state to participate in meaningfully in oil and gas development. To bring cabinet approval into effect, the final draft of South African National Petroleum Company bill has been submitted to the state law advisors for constitutional class certification and will be gazetted for comments in July this year. We implore members to ensure that its finalization before the end of this term of the administration is necessary. I can see that Honorable Melam is agreeing in Japanese, is shaking his hand. He's agreeing in Japanese. Now, the closure of crude oil refineries has presented a new set of challenges for our economy, with potential instability if not well managed. Importation of petroleum products has reached unprecedented level, and the robustness of the distribution infrastructure will be tested when Sasolburg refinery goes into mandatory maintenance for 4 months, scheduled for later this month. To ameliorate the risk of product shortage of market, contingency plans are in place and product imports have been lined up. We are also pleased that Cape Town refinery is back in full operation, as this will narrow the supply and demand gap market. To enable us to deliver these commitments, the department's budget for the 2024 financial year is 10.7 billion rand. You can notice that it's one of the smallest budgets in our budgets, confirming an argument that I consistently raise, that we are not investing enough in revenue generating departments. We spend more money in social spending. It's an issue that we must review, because these revenue generating departments must be supported and must receive sufficient funds. And many of the big part of this amount, about 8.5 billion rand, is earmarked for transfers to public entities, municipalities, and other institutions of planning agents. A large portion of the funds under transfer will be dispersed to ESCOM and various municipalities for the implementation of the Integrated National Electrification Program, INEP, which is connecting homesteads to the grid. Through this program, households will continue to electrify through the connection to the grid. To this end, 6 billion is earmarked under INEP as follows. 3.8 billion INEP goes to ESCOM grant, and 2.2 billion goes to INEP municipality grant. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, let me thank the Deputy Minister for her pivotal role in the work we do as the ministry, as well as the members of the House for their continuous guidance and support, particularly the Portfolio Committee of Mineral Resources and Energy. I must say, Honorable Lucipo, sometimes when you go to the Portfolio Committee, we feel the pinch, but it's a necessary pinch that we must feel. We enjoy going there, we learn in the process, we gain experience. I also wish to extend our gratitude to DMRE led by DMRE Executive and the SOEs. I also extend my appreciation to partners in the Economic Cooperation and support. I will be committing a mistake if I don't thank my wife, Nolwan, who is in the house, and my family broadly, and my support staff in the private office for their continued support. At times, in the execution of our tasks, we've been tested from all angles. We've been at all times, notwithstanding both personal and national and even international pressure, ready to hold firm and raise the flag of our country development, guided by the progressive policy perspective of the governing of the center, which is nothing else but the people. Honorable members, I present budget vote number 34 for a deliberation and ultimately adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable Wolmerans.
Ke go leboge modulasetilo ke fetise madume go letona la diminerale le maatla Re Mantashe, motlatsi wa gagwe Menkabane, lelokologolo kgotsa modulasetilo wa komiti Re Luzipo, maloko a kokoano bosetšhaba ya rona le baagi ka kakaretso madume. Modulasetilo ANC e dumelana le go thekga tekanyetsokabo ya bo 34 ka gore lefapha la diminerale le tsa maatla le na le bokgoni jwa go laolwa ka manontlhotlho dikuno tsa diminerale le maatla mo sedikeng se re leng mo go sona. Ngwagatso pedi tse di fetileng, Eskom e ntse e le mo setlhoeng sa dikgang ka mathata ao a e aparetseng naga le mo setheong seo. Sa ntlha, Eskom e fokoditse kelo ya motlakase mo go sa amogelesegeng mo setšhabeng. E amile le maemo a ikonomi thata mo batho ba tlhoka se ba ka iphedisang. Sa bobedi, Eskom e tlhatlositse selekanyetso sa ditarifi tsa motlakase seo se bakileng kelotlase ya letseno ka kakaretso. Go nnile le poelo morago mo dikunong. Sekai, dituelo kgotsa ditarifi tse di kwa godimo di tsere lotseno la ba dikobo dikhutshwane, mme fela Eskom yone ya ungwelwa le fa e sa beletse mo go tlhotlheng le go atoloseng kelo ya mafaratlhatlha a motlakase mo nageng. Jaanong, DMRE e lemogile gore go na le bothata ebile bothata bo tlhokega go rarabololwa ka ponyo ya leitlho. DMRE e na le ditshitshinyo. Chairperson, just to illustrate, the recent amendments to Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act, the Electricity Pricing Policy, and the Electricity Amendment Bill seek to create a competitive electricity market with open transmission access, which allows the sale of electricity by IPPs direct to customers, municipalities, and Eskom, whilst incentivizing investment in the electricity market through cost-reflective tariffs. Tabling these amendments to Parliament will therefore not only reduce the burden of Eskom, but also improve the security of supply of electricity broaden the basis of economic growth, and increase the potential for additional green jobs in the country. Evidence suggests that major private companies such as Shoprite, African Rainbow Minerals, Anglo-American, Ford South Africa, Goldfields, Kumba Iron Ore, South African Breweries, Heineken South Africa, Sibanya Stillwater, and Tiger Brands are already incentivized to respond to the planned amendments to provide reliable and affordable supply of electricity. While the level of electricity generated by these companies is minimal to reduce the burden on Eskom, DMRE nonetheless wishes to sufficiently create a competitive electricity market and tariffs quicker, as it has seriously deployed its administrative resources to the task of working closely with the Department of Public Enterprises to advance the unbundling of Eskom into 3 separate divisions, which seek to change Eskom's monopoly position in generation and distribution network, which will eventually be good for the economy and the customers. Of course, opposition parties have a stance that argue that the unbundling of Eskom is a precursor to privatizations, and inevitably that would push for the unbundling to be delayed or reversed. Within that, the only thing that the opposition, more specifically the EFF and the UDF, can delay might be the state of the nation like they normally do, rather than unbundling the Eskom, because the ANC-led government through the DMRE and Department and Enterprises understands that the extreme consequences of load shedding and energy insecurity require that the ideological debate between state and private ownership be set aside, and all mechanisms to address load shedding and energy insecurity must be mobilized. Other opposition parties like the DA and the Freedom Front support the unbundling of Eskom in the hope that the entry of IPPs would gradually erode Eskom's market share, thus replacing state ownership with private ownership in the electricity market, as both parties presume the private ownership of enterprises is all that is necessary for economic success. The DMRE maintains the openness of the electricity market. Mounting evidence suggests that it is far from being a paragon of laissez-faireism, and instead amplifies the role of the state in the provision of electricity through Eskom. Take, for example, the DMRE has rationalized African Exploration, Mining and Finance Corporation, AEMFC, as well as supported the opening of expansions of Sasol and Seriti coal mines in Mpumalanga to secure the supply of coal to Eskom for the generation of electricity. Given that the price of coal, which has increased by 40% between 2008 and 2020, has also increased the cost of electricity generation and aggravated load shedding and energy insecurity. The environmentalist has got an argument that DMRE is pursuing growth first, clean up later, through its support for coal, which has higher risk for environmental costs than the more mature renewable energies. In short, they suggest DMRE is counterproductive from a just transition standpoint. As expected, the DA also completely misses the point of just transition, pushing the mythical narrative that DMRE support for coal is extremely detrimental to the grain economy. In particular, the innovation of clean coal technology spearheaded by CGS under the portfolio of DMRE allows the coal industry to operate sustainably without damaging the environment. Yet no matter how clean coal becomes, it will remain dirtier compared to the renewables such as wind, solar, nuclear, and gas. But there are opportunities in using clean coal technologies in the short to medium term, such as retaining employment and competitiveness in the coal industry, while the ANC-led government through DMRE devises greener strategies that do develop new industries and opportunities with similar economic and employment benefits, especially for communities dependent on coal for economic activities such as in Mpumalanga. Although coal remains a critical input in energy generation and a source of survival for vulnerable stakeholders, the DMRE is currently using its planning capacity to incentivize investment in cleaner technologies such as gas, making it visually possible for the country to transition to a green economy in the long run. Through the Upstream Petroleum Resources Bill and Gas Amendment Bill, the DMRE has incentivized investments of at least $2 billion in the first phase of the Brulpada development in Block 11 and 12B, which is expected to produce 3 gas wells by the end of 2025. More importantly, discovered gas wells present an opportunity to reduce increased electricity costs and insecurity for the mining sector, which often results in uncompetitive extraction costs. Reducing electricity costs for the mining sector is a catalyst to investment in the mining commodities discovered by CGS that are becoming increasingly critical to in the face of the transition to green economy. It also increases investments in communities through the SLPs. SLPs which lacked enforcement in the past, the DMRE has recognized the positive role that SLPs can play. An example is the handing over of 2 clinics at Rockdale and Cathyville in Middleburg and Barberton, built by the Barberton Mine and Seriti Resources as part of SLPs. Going further, the DMRE has found it more appropriate to develop mining and mineral sector, women and gender equality strategy and implement plan, and the Women Diggers program to reverse the growing trend of women under representation, which continues to plague the mining industries. Key successes of these initiatives aimed at improving women participation at an entry level of small-scale mining is financial and technical support. Thus, the DMRE is crowding in investment to support women representation in the mining industry through a funding partnership with the Industrial Development Corporation. For this mentioned above incentives and others not stated, the ANC wholeheartedly supports this budget vote 34. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Milam.
Chairperson, by now, even the most jaded of ANC loyalists must agree that the energy crisis is crippling South Africa. What is worrying, however, is that for the Department of Energy and its entities, it is business as usual. There is no urgency, no drive to improve the situation. Quite frankly, it might as well be called the Department of No Energy. As for Minister Mantashe, well, perhaps we should let his accomplishments, or lack thereof, speak for him. I have in my hand the minister's signed performance agreement. So shall we see how he does? His first responsibility, and I'm only looking at energy, is to contribute in development of a just transition framework and ensure transition to an energy mix as per IRP 2019. I think we can all agree that the minister has been a stumbling block in this regard and that progress has been slow to non-existent. IRP 2019 was based on poor assumptions and bad data, and the new IRP minister is behind schedule. And the just energy transition? Well, despite an $8.5 billion commitment in foreign funding, no one in this government, least of all Minister Mantashe, can agree on how to spend it. The next target is to improve the energy availability factor to ensure a constant supply of electricity. That's at record low levels, and load shedding is now at persistent stage 6, with forecasts predicting that it will worsen in the months ahead. Although, to be fair, the minister did open up the risk mitigation independent power producers procurement program, even if it was an unmitigated disaster in terms of implementation. But to date, none of those projects are generating any electricity, more than 3 years after preferred bidders were announced. What about increasing Eskom's reserve margin to counter load shedding? How's that going, Minister? Well, again, it's deteriorated rapidly under your control, and Eskom's operating reserves are barely keeping the lights on. Maybe explore embedded generation options to augment Eskom capacity. Well, no, not much has been done in this regard. In fact, we should be doing everything we can to make it cheaper and easier to install embedded generation, including reducing import tariffs and local content requirements. But has Minister Mantashe had any such engagements with his counterparts at Trade and Industry or COGTA? It appears not. Has he broadened the Section 34 determinations for municipal procurement? No. Or perhaps the separation and unbundling of Eskom to eliminate cross-subsidization and improve efficiency. Well, it turns out that's not going so well either. The Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill, which is crucial to enabling this, still isn't before the Portfolio Committee, and it appears unlikely to be considered before Parliament rises for the 2024 elections. Of course, if the ANC had considered the DA's private members bill, which sought to do exactly this in 2019, the minister might actually have achieved this target. If you've been watching, you'll know that we have run out of jet fuel at our airports on several occasions. But Minister Mantashe is responsible for security of supply and diversification of liquid fuels. There's no liquid fuels master plan. Our refining capacity is all but gone, and our supply pipeline is weak and subject to disruption. These are just some of Minister Mantashe's targets. The reality is he is failing on just about every single measure. When ordinary South Africans are suffering because of the cost of living, and when electricity and fuel prices are primary drivers of inflation, one would expect the Minister and the Department of Energy to treat our energy crisis as an economic crisis, but that's not happening. There is hope, however. Where the DA governs, more businesses are succeeding, more people are finding employment, and the economy is growing faster than anywhere else in South Africa. That's because the DA has more than just
your
a
time
plan
is now
for dealing with our
expired.
energy crisis. The DA gets things done.
The next speaker is the Honorable Madokwe.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Manithathe elithuba ndibulise kwaye ndibulele umongameli wethu sonke, the son of the soil and commander-in-chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, President Julius Silo Malema. Greetings to commissars and ground forces of the Economic Emancipation Movement, and greetings to all the supporters of the EFF in South Africa, Africa, and the world over. This year, 2023, marks 10 years since the formation of the Economic Freedom Fighters, the only weapon at the hands of our people, a thorn in the flesh of our colonizers, and the only voice of the oppressed and marginalized. It has been 10 years of unbroken struggle, alongside the widows, children, and dependents of our Black brothers who were massacred in Marikana under the instruction of South Africa's sitting president. Alongside mining communities across the country who have not
Honorable
seen any development or employment.
Order, Honorable Member, there's a point of order. Why are you rising, Honorable Member?
All right, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I'm rising on Rule 85. The member just enunciated that the president is instructed to the people to be massacred in
Yes.
Marikana.
No, I heard that comment. Honorable Member, you must withdraw that comment.
Withdrawn, Chairperson.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Alongside mining communities across the country have not seen any development or employment, but instead are left with disease, polluted water and air, and a damaged environment. Alongside mine workers who are still exploited, discarded, and to this day are fighting the same battle the generation of Amumbush felt fighting. In the same breath, we would like to extend our condolences to the families of the mining community activists who are to this day being killed for protecting their communities from greedy mining companies and politicians. It has been 10 years of unbroken struggle alongside Black businesses who are being systematically closed out of participating in the petroleum industry. An example being Econ Oil, the only Black-owned, female-owned petroleum company which was blacklisted from providing services to Eskom, allegedly under the instruction of Minister Jan Nandas. While a Swiss company, ABB, which confessed to economic crimes, continues to do business as usual in South Africa. It has been 10 years of unbroken struggle alongside our people who are losing homes, jobs, businesses, their lives, loved ones, and even losing the ability to give their loved ones dignified funerals because of the consequences of load shedding. As we celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the People's Movement, we invite mine workers, mining communities, and our people across the four corners of South Africa to come celebrate with us at FNB Stadium on the 29th of July, 2023. We further call on all South Africans to donate to the only organization that is not funded by the Ruperts and Oppenheimers, Rob Herzog, and our colonizers, primarily the US and the British. One can donate as little as 10 Rand by texting EFF donation to 38172 as many times as they want. And details for those who would like to donate more are available on all our social media pages. With that being said, House Chairperson, the EFF hereby registers that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is failing to uphold and fulfill its objectives and provide the necessary services to the citizens of South Africa, both in the mining and energy sector. We want to declare from the onset that we reject this budget vote. As we speak, South Africans are not at the behest to practically and proudly claim the mineral resources of their motherland are benefiting them. This department, alongside the Minister of Police, is to this day failing to deal adequately with the challenge and economic loss posed by the Zamazamas, who are highly organized and continue to smuggle our minerals. They have instead used the issue of illegal mining to instigate xenophobia in this country. Yet they know very well that the majority of kingpins and role players are South African and international syndicates. As the days unfold and years go by, we hear less and less in terms of steps taken to address this matter. It leads us to conclude that politically connected individuals are beneficiaries of illegal mining. The mines of South Africa continue to serve a hazardous risk to the workers and surrounding communities. The Jagersfontein disaster serves as the most recent reminder of the potential negative impacts of unprotected mines in our communities. The EFF is the only political party that has been raising the issue of Jagersfontein at every given chance, with the ruling party always jumping afterwards, pretending it will do something. The energy sector is in shambles, and the three ministers are more concerned about catfights over the powers of Eskom and energy supply. The reality of the matter is that a total national power grid collapse is looming, no matter the cheap political reassurances claiming measures to avoid that. Eskom has already proposed an energy plan to implement load shedding up to stage 16, meaning South Africans may face power cuts up to 32 hours. The EFF has warned before, and we warn again, that creating 1 million ministers to oversee Eskom instead of assigning it to the DMRE is only at a time when South Africa needs direction and a stable energy plan the most. The creation of these ministers is illogical and shows that this country has given power to a confused bunch. We need to save the current crisis by speedily cladding in all power ships. We cannot be held at ransom by those who are seeking bribes first before doing so. Labor in the utility must be incorporated in saving Eskom, as they've on numerous occasions outlined what the problems are. And we believe them because they also told us that 6 power stations were deliberately taken off the grid to ensure load shedding persists. And those power stations miraculously started working when the EFF called for a national shutdown. The EFF still insists on build, operate, and transfer model between IPPs and the state to ensure a state-led renewable energy industry. And when all is said and done, the state-owned mining company must be capacitated and play a role in supplying affordable and high-grade coal to Eskom. We must shout for help from our BRICS partners who serve as a model of brilliant energy supply. This country's the petroleum industry has practically collapsed with no refineries, and instead of entering into partnerships with private, this department is altering legislation and bulldozing South Africans to allow the agenda of donating our newly found oil and gas to multinational corporations. We reject this budget that does not take into consideration the lives of ordinary South Africans and the transfer of our mineral wealth back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Nsimang. Order, honorable members, order.
Thank
Order,
you,
honorable members.
Chair.
Honorable Ntlangwini and the
The
Honorable
purpose of this
Haupapu.
budget is to regulate
Honorable
the minerals
members.
and mining
Honorable
sector.
Msimang, Honorable Msimang. Honorable Nkangwini and the Honorable Papu, if you continue with this exchange, I'll ask both of you to leave the chamber. Honorable Nkangwini and the Honorable Papu, you are now disrupting the budget vote and there's a member from another political party on the podium. It's unacceptable what you're doing. You may now proceed, Professor.
Honorable Chairperson, the purpose of this budget is to regulate the minerals and mining sector for transformation, growth, and development. However, the Minerals Council noted the disappointing performance of the mining sector's contribution to the country's GDP of about 7.5%. The council continued by noting the sector's importance to the fiscus with its 30% contribution to the 75 billion rand corporate tax take. This highlights the potential contribution of the mining sector that was lost due to constraints in electricity supply and transport logistics. Considering that matters related to electricity have been largely shifted to the Ministry of Electricity, we find it important to question how issues such as the impact of load shedding on the mining sector will be addressed. There seems to be a great deal of overlapping functions between this department and that of the Ministry of Electricity. Consequently, we wonder whether the bloating of the cabinet was necessary and how this will impact the budget and ultimately the taxpayer in the long term. One way in which government proactively can proactively make use of its resources is by supporting the public-private partnership of the country's railways so as to avoid working in silos, which is the government current status quo. We echo the sentiments of the council in encouraging the splitting of Transnet freight rail and infrastructure by October 2023, as it will provide the private sector with a platform to participate in the country's rail network, subsequently improving efficiencies and boosting exports. It is estimated that bulk commodity exporters forfeited revenue of 50 billion rand in 2022 when deliveries of minerals by train to ports were measured against targets. These funds could have aided with the reduction of VAT, which in turn could have contributed to lowering the prices of retail products. We cannot merely accept the loss of 50 billion rand, considering the economic state of our country. Despite its unique mineral endowment, the country has fallen short of translating these resources through their beneficiation into economic linkages that create productive value and employment. The IFP is of the opinion that public-private partnerships will allow for greater beneficiation to local communities surrounding mining areas. In consideration of the comments, the IFP supports the budget vote, and I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Msimang. The next speaker is the Honorable Bosso.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. In looking at the budget for minerals and energy, one should start with minerals by noting that South Africa is regressing as a mining destination, where we are now at number 57 out of 62 preferred destinations. The main reasons given for that are land claims, labor relations, organized crime, weak public services, including Transnet and Eskom. Now, the transformative agenda is, one can say, idealistic in its approach and in its objective. One can argue whether it works and whether it is a pragmatic policy to follow, but one should accept that there is a measure of trying to undo what has happened in the past. But what about organized crime? What about weak government services? Those two are actually the results of government failure. And there is nothing to be said about that, no positive angle to take to that problem. And if mining decreases, we also mentioned that 1% of the global exploration is done in South Africa at the moment. There is a pressure, the pressure mounts to export unbeneficiated ore in a need to get foreign currency fast. Now let's leave minerals there and go over to energy. The Honorable Minister made a distinction, or let's say a division between development and environmental affairs. Now I think there's one thing that we should keep in mind, and that is that non-renewable energy is those that are based on the burning of fossilized hydrocarbons. Gas is also a fossilized hydrocarbon unless it is hydrogen gas, which can be produced and which is therefore also renewable. The problem is, and that is actually not disputed, that in previous aeons, the whole Earth, the whole globe was not a nice place to live because of the lot of carbon in the air, in the atmosphere. And that was progressively bound in biological processes. And that is the base of present-day fossil fuels. And that anyone's aim should be to burn as little as possible of that. Now, if coal and oil should exit sooner or later, then it should be replaced at least by something, which could be nuclear, which does not emit any climate gases. And the safety problem seems to be somewhat solved, if one could put it that way. The one problem that has not been solved is the cost of it. Then we have solar, which is actually has a lot of transformative qualities to it, in the sense that solar radiation is evenly, not exactly evenly, but more evenly distributed than, say, coal or oil over the globe, and that the possession of that, the ownership of that, could be wide, or is actually widely spread between households, businesses, community organizations, and so forth, which makes it much more suitable for a transformative agenda, as well as for any community-based kind of approach to development in South Africa and all over the world. One could also look at hydrogen, which in sync with solar and with other technologies can be to the benefit of South Africa, as platinum, the platinum group of metals, which is very important in the production of hydrogen, is also a South African asset which we can use. The fact is, in the end, that there are a lot of emerging technologies at the moment, new approaches to batteries, new approaches to energy harvesting, as one does not actually create energy or produce it. The question is whether the policy that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy currently pursues is the correct policy, And I think for that, there's a resounding no, because it does not work in the correct direction. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Thring.
Honorable House Chairperson, the ACDP notes that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is mandated to ensure transparent, efficient regulation of South Africa's mineral resources and minerals industry, and to ensure the secure and sustainable provision of energy in support of economic growth. Additionally, it has the medium-term priorities of regulating the petroleum sector, ensuring mine health, safety, and equity, rehabilitating mines and the environment, extending access to electricity, enhancing energy efficiency, and managing nuclear energy in accordance with international commitments. Clearly, this department has failed in carrying out all of the aspects of its mandate, and it has failed to implement its stated medium-term priorities. Chief of these failures has to be the failure to ensure the secure and sustainable provision of energy in support of economic growth. The ACDP notes that access to electricity has been greatly extended. However, government has failed to keep up with demand due to poor planning, maladministration, nepotism, looting, theft, state capture, missing billions, rampant corruption, resulting in an inability to keep the lights on. Honorable House Chairperson, I have consistently said that in an area where South Africa can increase its potential for economic growth, development, and job creation is the beneficiation of its extracted minerals, where beneficiation transforms a mineral or group of minerals into a higher value product, which can be consumed either locally or exported. Our country is rich in a variety of minerals, which includes gold, diamonds, iron ore, platinum, manganese, chromium, copper, uranium, silver, beryllium, titanium, amongst others. Sadly, ruling party over the last 29 to 30 years has failed to implement the necessary structural reform while perpetuating the legacy of our colonial past by continuing to be exporters of our raw materials and importers of value-added products. This is corroborated by the fact that our level of beneficiation is negligible when compared to the quantity of exported raw materials. It is time for change, and the ACDP stands ready to implement the required change which benefits our citizens, develops our economy, creates jobs, and gives back to ordinary South Africans the pride and the dignity they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy.
House Chairperson, there will always be a crisis of unbalanced thinking when you have been an oppressor or a beneficial of oppression. The right and left brain theory suggests that brain is divided into two hemispheres, and each hemisphere is responsible for different cognitive functions, with left hemisphere associated with linear thinking and preference for objective facts, while right hemisphere is associated with non-linear thinking and a preference for subjective experience and emotions. That's why the DA is speaking like this, because it is led by Stenhuisen. There is a need to learn something from this. There is a need to learn from this theory, the importance of balanced thinking. Learn to balance your thinking. I hope this theory is assisting you today. It is true that we cannot build the new epoch without understanding the old. I quote, "Hide nothing from the masses of our people, tell no lies, expose lies whenever they are told, mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures, claim no easy victories, I close quote. There has been systemic exploitation and exclusion through unequal distribution of political, economic, and ideological power that has been so deeply embedded in our society since 1652. Unequal power structures played a central role during South Africa's long colonial period from 1652 to 1910, and trend continues during the period of segregation and apartheid from 1910 to 1994, when power was entirely monopolized by whites with devastating consequences for Blacks. No other political organization fought for this oppression, fought for white domination and democracy in this country, except for the oldest liberation movement, which is the African National Congress. Honorable members, the transition from apartheid to an inclusive democracy did not occur without loss of blood. Eventually, when we assumed power in 1994, the inherited social injustices resulted in the democratic government inheriting a rather contradictory legacy with inherent major socio-economic problems, including the high levels of unemployment, poverty, lack of opportunities, and high levels of crime and violence. The ruling party is trying by all means to address the imbalances of the past. Honorable members, our manifesto stipulates that we aim to transform the economy to ensure that it serves the people as a whole. It is worth noting that the MPRDA builds on the ideals of the Freedom Charter, and henceforth the minerals beneath the soil are held in the custody of the state on behalf of the people as a whole, not the minority. Our laws, including the framework of the mining charter, seeks to achieve the historic goals of dismantling the barriers of socio-economic development across spectrum, which is race, gender, and class. As Honorable Minister of Mineral Resources has already indicated, transformation of the mining and energy sectors, as well as growth and development, will be central in this period. Hence, the importance, amongst others, the increasing mining through exploration. Indeed, it must concern all of us that exploration with the potential to resolve our energy security needs is continuously hampered by the prolonged litigation from the environmentalists who do not internalize the totality of socio-economic challenges we face as the country. And the DA, they are part of those programs. I'm going to reflect on the programs linked to the state-owned enterprises.
Order, honorable members, order.
The state-owned enterprises under the department received unqualified audit opinions. The CGS, which is amongst institutions pivotal in the implementation of our exploration strategy, is seized with the process of geomapping of key minerals. The target mapping is progressing well, and the onshore coverage has now reached 11.5%, with further targets of 16% for the current financial year. The research on carbon capture, usage, and storage that is conducted by the entity will make a huge contribution in the decarbonization of our industry. The project was initiated as partnership with the World Bank, and I am confident, Minister and the House, that our partners will continue to support the program. The nuclear energy policy directs that nuclear shall form part of the country's strategy to mitigate climate change. This is because nuclear is recognized as a clean energy source that has base load. Furthermore, nuclear has been demonstrated globally to be an energy source that contributes to economic growth and technology development through investment in infrastructure, job creation, and further development of highly skilled workers. To advance the implementation of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear new build program, the department recently completed a procurement framework. This will ensure that the procurement of the 2,500 megawatts of nuclear energy is completed by the year 2024. The department will continue to exercise oversight on the ESCOM implementation of Koeberg nuclear power station long-term operation to ensure security of energy supply for an additional 20 years. Worth noting is that Koeberg is the most reliable plant within the ESCOM fleet, and continues to stabilize the national electricity grid. Therefore, the country should continue to support ESCOM's implementation of Kupe Nuclear Power Station long-term operation because its success is important for the energy security of the country. Next, in collaboration with the department and other key stakeholders, is implementing a multi-purpose reactor project that will replace our globally renowned Safari 1 nuclear research reactor by 2030. Once the feasibility report is finalized, it will enable the MPR project to be shovel ready. The multi-purpose reactor project will ensure that South Africa remains in the top range of radioisotope producers in the world well in the future. The ANC is advancing transformation, and we are ensuring that there will be energy security in the country. The NRAD has started with the project development for the establishment of the centralized interim storage facility for the storage of the nuclear fuel. A draft feasibility report has been completed and is currently being subjected to an independent gateway review. We have taken note of the global developments where the European Union has taken a positive stance on the inclusion of nuclear and gas in their green taxonomy. The United Kingdom and United States of America also included nuclear in their green hydrogen strategies. As a country, we should learn from these global players and include nuclear in our green taxonomy as well as green hydrogen strategies to enable investment in the nuclear space, which will ensure that it plays a pivotal role in the country's just energy transition. SAF Group is central to some of its core initiative is addressing some structural energy challenges through strategic partnership, acquisition, infrastructure refurbishment and repurposing, and the consolidation of asset classes to create a foundation for long-term commercial sustainability to improve the country's strategic position in relation to security of energy supply. Key amongst these include the brownfield acquisition, you said you are not doing anything, Aqua Redstone project, acquisition of 50% BP storage facility in the Western Cape, acquisition of 60% stake in an LPG import terminal, Uga LNG developments, and jet fuel. As the operator, our entity Petro SA will manage the jet fuel tank terminals and supply aviation fuels. Mintech, on the other side, has trained a number of 200 women on small scale mining, and those women trainees were from these provinces: in Limpopo, in Northwest, in Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, Free State, in Northern Cape, Siyakuba, with the transformation in the sector. On derelict and ownerless mines, during the year under review, a number of 95 holdings were closed in the Gauteng, with 65 of holdings were in Krugersdorp area. Again, in terms of asbestos, 2 mines were rehabilitated in the year under review, which is Lacha Dry Mine and Riris Mine in the Northern Cape. On commercialization, during the year under review, Mintech produced HIV test kits, which have passed validation tests by 100%. The clinical trials were completed in March 2023. In terms of empowerment of those previously disadvantaged remains important part of the minerals and energy sectors in order to address the imbalances of the past and stepping further in effecting transformation agenda. We will also work towards approving and launch of the draft mining sector youth strategy, the youth in energy strategy, the mining sector women empowerment and gender equality strategy, and will also monitor the implementation of energy sector empowerment and gender equality strategy.
Deputy Minister, your time is now expired. The next speaker is the Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, there must be a deliberate effort to retain the value of the mineral wealth within our shores. We can't keep saying we are rich in mineral resources, yet the people of the country continue to languish in poverty and unemployment. A global banking giant, Citi, in 2010 valued South Africa's mineral resources in the ground at $2.5 trillion US. The country can learn from India, where there's a deliberate beneficiation of its mineral resources at competitive prices to create sustainable jobs and industrialize the economy. We have the best grades of iron ore, yet we are the net importers of finished steel products. We export most of our iron ore to China and India, and then buy the finished products at high prices from these countries. The iron ore and other minerals in our country should be beneficiated, and we should be the world leader in supplying steel. The steel used to build infrastructure projects in the continent in other parts of the world should be supplied by us. Coal is to South Africa what oil is to countries in the Middle East. We must double the extraction of coal to boost our economy. With technological advancements, coal now can be used with zero emissions, and South Africa has got over 200 years of coal reserves that could be extracted to boost our economy. There must be a systematic integration of minerals, of the minerals industry contribution into manufacturing objectives, centered on local production and sourcing of local goods. On community participation and benefits, the department must hold the mining houses to account for the social labor plans to ensure the commitment to the development of the communities are actually done in the interest of sustainable growth, not just compliance. On the energy front, our relationship with the world does us no good as we're dictated by major polluters as if we're the worst in that context, when our global contribution of greenhouse gases emission, such as carbon dioxide, is a measly 0.4%. We can't seek to please world leaders in pollution, Minister, at the expense of dragging our own country into darkness. SAF must procure a 30-day emergency full stock to avert the disaster when the electricity grid collapses. In order to have a reliable energy system, a heavy investment in servicing and maintaining of power stations is required. Managers with a proven track record of turning around power stations must be deployed to poor performing stations. Given the crisis we're in, ESCOM, in consultation with the relevant departments, must do everything possible to extend the decommissioning schedule of the power stations that are due for decommissioning until we're out of this crisis. Lastly, Minister, the root causes of the problems that we have is the lack of political will. All of these proposals are meaningless.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your
if the-
time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Sheikh Imam. I hope he's on the virtual platform. No. We shall proceed, honorable members. I recognize Honorable S.J. Graham.
Thank you, Chairperson. Typically, budget speeches serve as an occasion to discuss the allocation of billions of rands on the provision of services to our citizens for the upcoming fiscal year. For ordinary South Africans, though, most of what is said is incomprehensible and meaningless. So perhaps in addressing the budget for the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, we should look at some numbers that do mean something to our residents. The number of load shedding hours in 2022 were 3 times that of the previous 5 years. We have already experienced 2,896 hours of load shedding in the first quarter of 2023, almost 80% the number of hours for the whole of 2022. And of those, 548 hours have been in stage 6 versus only 166 hours last year. For those who can afford it, alternative sources of energy, such as generators, inverters, and solar panels, are available for heating, cooking, and lighting. But for the nearly 3.6 million indigent households across our country, when the blackouts come, they are plunged into darkness and unable to withstand the frigid winter temperatures. And the impacts of load shedding will further condemn them to a life of poverty as the opportunities for finding employment diminish with each day. Minister of Electricity, Dr. Ramaphosa, told Parliament last week that it is estimated that we have already lost 650,000 jobs due to load shedding, and that all indications are that we stand to lose in excess of 850,000 if load shedding continues unabated. Clearly, Minister Mantashe, your approach to date has not worked, and it definitely doesn't help for you to double down on your efforts while stubbornly hanging on to Cold War ideologies, archaic policies, and outdated technologies. Your government's lackadaisical attitude to the energy crisis is underscored by the fact that the new integrated resource plan, essentially an electricity capacity blueprint, is already 2 years overdue. By contrast, the DA-run Western Cape government is urgently innovating to address both current and future energy needs. As an example, the province has set aside 7 billion rand to mitigate the electricity crisis through its energy resilience program. The program is aimed primarily at supporting local government to develop and sustain renewable energy infrastructure to ensure that participating municipalities continue to provide services during load shedding, as well as to promote economic growth. Chairperson, load shedding is not just an electricity crisis. It is an unfolding humanitarian crisis, and this callous ANC government has yet to provide any real solutions aside from a new set of protocols for stage 9, load shedding and beyond. Winter is upon us. People face unrelenting darkness and bone-chilling cold. The only glimmer of hope for the country is a DA government taking office in 2024. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, order. I now recognize Honorable NP Kyobeka Makeke. Over to you, ma'am. If I may, while you are still walking towards the podium, I request that the duty whips also advise the members to sit there. Excuse me? It has to be like that, honorable members, but it's her maiden speech. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, House Chairperson. In my maiden speech, I would like to draw your attention on the following. Chairperson, just like many other challenges we have faced as a nation, the prevailing energy situation is not unsurmountable. Several efforts are being made to find a lasting solution, build the required energy availability factor, and comply with international commitments for just energy transition. Chairperson, while opposition parties have been using this debate to campaign and attempt to fit the public a claptrap notion that the DMRE has followed incorrect, inconsistent, unpredictable, and inefficient policies and regulatory framework in the past, the African National Congress stance is that the DMRE is not destructive to implementing steps towards green transformation in the energy sector and to shifting the electricity market towards renewable energies, and therefore we support budget vote 34. Yet, in believing this, the ANC's intention is not to defend the DMRE where its policies and regulatory framework prove to have produced undesired outcomes, or vilify the DMRE where its policies and regulatory framework prove to be most successful. Chairperson, the Minister of DMRE, Honorable Mantashe, has been labeled a coal fundamentalist and a coal dinosaur by lobbyists for supposedly derailing the country to pivot renewable energies. In other words, the Minister of the DMRE has successfully locked in South Africa's energy sector in a path that is dependent on fossil fuel as sources of energy generation and the corresponding greenhouse gas emissions in the past 5 years. But axiomatic evidence proves otherwise. Ever since Honorable Mantashe took over as the minister, the DMRE has resolved delays in licensing and contracting with IPPs, and in turn, introduced renewable energies to the energy mix through the risk mitigation independent power producer program and the renewable energy independent power producer program, which is currently at its 6th bid window. More importantly, most of the preferred bidders in bid windows 5 and 6, as well as the RMIPPP, have reached the legal, financial, and commercial close, thereby suggesting that they will connect to the ESCOM grid between 2023 and 2025. Although the procured renewable energies would never tame the socially and economically disruptive effects of load shedding or rolling blackouts within a short space of time, the risk of not procuring any renewable energy at all could be much worse to the economy and people, as ESCOM supplies the base load of power in the country. Simply put, delaying procurement of renewable energies implies costs that are undoubtedly higher in the mid to long run, such as climate change and environmental damage. Thus, the DMRE has demonstrated a much greater ability to support the transition to a green economy and proxies such as renewable energy. Bids can be used to measure such seriousness. Other efforts in support of the transition to a green economy by the DMRE include the Kuberg nuclear power plant long-term operation program and the procurement of 2,500 megawatts from nuclear energy and developing gas power. More especially, I hope investment towards nuclear energy does not irritate Honorable Mailem, who has been acting as the opium of masses that discourage South Africans from wanting nuclear based on false assumptions that it is a fossil fuel. The EU and other developed countries treat it as green energy. What is important to recognize is that the DMRE policies and regulatory framework which support green transformation have not only induced innovations in wind and solar energy technologies, but also in smart grids. In particular, several municipalities, such as the city of Tshwane, where I come from, the city of Johannesburg, and the city of Nelson Mandela Bay, are currently implementing the rollout of smart meters and smart metering systems to improve, amongst other things, grid reliability, revenue management, and energy efficiency, thanks to the work of the South African National Energy Development Initiative under the portfolio of the DMRE. The innovation in smart metering has been recognized by ESCOM as groundbreaking as the national utility plans to roll out smart meters across South African households in a 16 billion demand side management initiative to relieve pressure on the grid by reducing load during peak times by 7,000 megawatts. This leading to consumer costs, saving managing demand while increasing supply. Another important innovation is the introduction of containerized microgrids used by ESCOM as a sustainable solution to supply green energy to rural and remote areas to improve reliability of the supply of electricity. In Wilhelmina Farm, so located in Vicksburg in the Free State, ESCOM microgrids already supply electricity to close to 14 households with 81 family members that comprise in that community. Pedantic opposition parties with the anti-ANC stances would obviously ridicule ESCOM microgrid connections in Vicksburg as a drop in the ocean, considering that almost 30% of the country is not yet electrified. While ESCOM microgrid connections may be marginal progress, the DMRE has successfully reduced the number of unelectrified households through grid connections. Just to illustrate, DMRE has managed to connect 500,418 households to national grid between April 2019 and March 2022. Such cases that count for success are ignored intentionally by opposition parties in favor of cases that account for challenges such as the National Solar Water Heater Program. To date, the Solar Water Geyser Program has not yet achieved its goal, ensuring that vulnerable households at least not negatively impacted by electricity shortages and spiraling electricity tariffs. Like every program, it has brought risks and opportunities, whereas the halting of this program undermines green gas emissions reduction and green economic targets of the government. It has accelerated industrialization objectives. The government is 70% of the solar water geyser have been produced by local manufacturers, such as iSolar factory in Atlantis, where the DA governs, but cannot nurture industrialization through provincial programs. Of course, the low implementation of the solar water geyser program has resulted in local manufacturers becoming increasingly uncompetitive as the new solar geyser purchases have slowed down, which contribute to rising costs, job cuts. However, local manufacturers such as solar factory can move into opportunities with the new renewable energy industry, such as the solar home system. The project, in conclusion, it's important throughout breakthrough made by DMRE in energy sector must be harnessed as the achievement of just transition and energy security depend on them. As Parliament, we need to continue to monitor implementation of the integrated resource plan and assist DMRE continue to build the energy availability factor. We are encouraged by the multiple initiatives that are being implemented. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable SM Jafta.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy takes its cue from the white paper on mineral policy. This policy was conceived in 1998. It recognized the South African mining industry as the cornerstone of our economy. Contemporary legislative framework such as the NDP, the Integrated Resource Plan, and the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan also informs policy direction and operational requirements of the DMRE. This budget must therefore speak to the plans and policies and how the ordinary men and women on the street will benefit from this allocation. Honorable Chair, it is common cause that the department's main responsibility is to guarantee reliable energy supply. This has been most glaring component of the department. On this score, the department has delivered us unreliable, costly, and unsecured energy supply. It cannot be gainsaid that energy insecurity is the main driver of this investment. The introduction of the gas amendment bill was touted as the main driver to unlocking investment in the gas sector, including creating investment potential in the gas industry and sectors and subsectors. And yet we know that our energy insecurity is ripe for capital flight. We know, Honorable Chair, that ideologically bickering in the ANC, mostly about renewables, has led to conflicting messages. Honorable Minister Gwede Mandashe knows that very clear. The department's entities are as poorly managed as the department itself. ESCOM, NESA, Mentec, and the Petroleum Agency of the South Africa and the National Nuclear Regulator have progressively failed. The less said about ESCOM, the better. Mentec has been tasked with the responsibility to decommission old and derelict mines at huge cost to the fiscus. Despite this, all old mines remain unrehabilitated, and Zamazamas are having a field day feeling at the craft. NASA has lost its independence and is failing to decommission and nuclear waste. Honorable Chair, we are moving against the tide. We can no longer speak in tongues about the urgency of bringing additional capacity to the national grid. The request to procure
Thank you, Honourable
2,500
Member. Thank
megawatts
you. Your
nuclear
time is
power
up.
must be
Thank you.
fast-tracked. I support as the AIC, Honorable Mantash, the
Thank you,
budget
Honourable
vote.
Member.
Thank you very much.
I now recognize Honorable Cope. I recognize Honorable M. John Nyonzo.
House Chairperson, ungawari, Comrade Z. And Petanga Saboko, this is my committee. We regard the energy crisis that is talked about in all corners of the nation as the crisis for land restoration. The energy resource is primarily linked to the rich abundance of resources to our beautiful land is blessed with. Gas, coal, water, and even the renewable energy is all based on land. The PAC approach is all-encompassing. Our understanding is that if the restoration of land to the African people is prioritized, the energy crisis will be under control and limited to a small scale. Public services linked to the people must not be privatized and made a sole preserve of the elites and super rich. We support universal access of the electricity, water, and other essential needs to the ordinary people can live, so that ordinary people can live a quality of life and standard of living that their land is blessed with. By so saying, Comrade Minister, PAC supports this budget.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable M.G. Hendricks. He's not on the platform either. I now recognize Honorable J.R.B. Lorima.
Thank you,
may
Madam Chair.
proceed, but before
South
you
Africa's
proceed,
mining industry-
remember, before you proceed next time as well, equally, you must sit on a seat where you're supposed so that you go to the podium. It will be much appreciated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. South Africa's mining industry built our country into one of the foremost economies of the world. We're a member of the G20. For a long time, we were the biggest economy in Africa. But mining has fallen on hard times. Yes, people can still make money running mines. And yes, hundreds of thousands of South Africans make a living and a higher than average wage from mining. But given the promise of our mineral endowment, we should have done better. We missed the resources boom of 2007, and the boom just passed did not spark the takeoff of our industry as it should have, although it did rescue government finances. The promise of explosive growth that should follow from our fabulous mineral wealth has never been realized. Government's attempts to spread the wealth was wrongly done by trying to micromanage the industry rather than by setting it free. South Africa has slipped further and further down in the perceptions of potential investors who could see the government crippled by its own socialist ideology and which saw them only as an enemy or a cash cow rather than as a partner in development. Now, too, many in the industry are battered, disheartened, and unwilling to take risk and focused on harvesting rather than building. There are fewer and fewer big capital investment mines and more short-term get-rich-quick schemes. Mines that should be built to last 20 years are being raided and finished in 5. But our mining industry is not over. It just needs a new vision. South Africa's mining industry needs a new deal. That deal should be motivated by the goal of using our mineral endowment to grow the economy, power intergenerational wealth creation among as many of our people as possible, and pulling people out of poverty. We need to empower entrepreneurs and investors rather than insiders and cronies. We need to get government out of the way. Micromanagement has not worked. We need to say to investors that they can make money if they put their money here. At the same time as they make money, they will create poverty-busting jobs and ensure a flow of tax revenues so we can afford the social goods and services that we need. If we resent investors and we chase them away, if we curb them, they will go where they are not curbed, and we will continue to live in poverty. We may live on top of diamonds, but when we can't dig them out, we will live in shacks. The industry needs to grow. We need more mining, not less. We need mining that focuses on the long life of mines rather than cherry picking and sterilizing because mines expect their investments will be snatched away from them by a rapacious state. We need mining that leaves as light and temporary a footprint as possible, so that when it is gone and the wealth realized, it does not leave decay, spoiled soil, and poisoned water. We need to understand that mining can rescue our economy if only we let it. A new deal needs a transparent cadastral rights and licensing system, no racial set-asides in ownership or employment, recognition of the rights of and proper compensation for landowners and occupiers, rapid, efficient, and honest licensing and permitting, no localization requirements, proper policing to ensure that the free exercise of mineral rights and the protection of national assets reigns. Government needs to get out of the way. 5 years ago, the Minerals Council estimated that by ensuring best practice in legislation and regulation, South Africa could create an additional 50,000 direct mining jobs and 200,000 indirect jobs. It's been calculated that each direct mining job supports 10 people. That means 1 million South Africans out of poverty by getting it right. Today, I believe that's an underestimate. In the alluvial diamond sector alone, we could easily claw back the 20,000 jobs that were lost because of the MPRDA's regulatory and transformation requirements. If we think the mining industry is a tool to right the wrongs of the past, or we think by a thicket of law and regulation, we can create a huge class of super wealthy people by socially engineering society, then we will betray the promise of our mineral endowment. 20 years ago, it may have been possible to argue that racial set-asides in licensing, ownership, and employment were justified by the racial set-asides of apartheid. Anybody making that argument today would have to believe that investment disincentives, the friction of a business-crushing state bureaucracy, and the door to corruption that is opened by social engineering are worth it, because Black enterprise and expertise simply cannot compete on a level playing field. That's nonsense. That belief disregards and disrespects the proven expertise and efficiency of Black people in mining. Instead, it accepts the perpetuation of a system of cronyism that ensures who you know and who your connections are is allowed to trump the need to extract value for entrepreneurs, employees, and state revenues. So, tell the departmental staff they're expected to be honest and do their jobs. Everybody will be expected to prove they were employed because of their knowledge and diligence, not because of who they were, who they know, or what they know about the misdeeds of their superiors. Ensure that the results of disciplinaries and investigations will be swift and public. End the messing around with the new cadastral system. For years, officials and politicians have been wriggling and twisting to avoid revealing exactly what rights have been granted to whom. Set a deadline. A new transparent cadastral system could be in place within 6 months. Cancel the mining charter. You could draw a line through it in an afternoon. Better protect landowners and residents and keep a careful eye on who may be losers from mining activity. Separate those who are angry at being hurt by a mine from those who are angry at not being made rich by it. I make these suggestions knowing that the ANC won't accept them. You may call it steadfast. We call it an inability to learn. It has proven itself a slave to its own ideology, impervious to evidence, experience, and good sense. But everybody else knows, give mining a new deal, and it could strike a mighty blow against poverty.
I now recognize Honorable M.G. Mataulo.
Thank you very much, House Chair. It is self-evident that opposition parties use the high stages of load shedding as the main source of their legitimacy in Parliament instead of their own programs. But what is notable from opposition parties is the absence of solution-oriented approach to resolving load shedding and energy insecurity in the country. Whereas opposition parties are pessimistic that the DMRE is inadequate to the task of addressing load shedding, the ANC is less cynical because we are convinced that if the DMRE is inadequate to its task, it's definitely not because they are not trying. Maybe, Minister, our Parliament must just deal with a very funny concept in the DA of shadow ministers. It has a potential of giving people funny ideas that they can be ministers, and it will remain that, just a funny idea. That's why Honorable Malem started his speech with Honorable Mantashe and he finished with Honorable Mantashe without anything in between. He said nothing at all. For instance, the department has initiated the procurement of 9,303 megawatts of additional power from different sources, such as renewable energies, gas, coal, and nuclear, through various bid windows and programs. And the undeniable competence and administrative capacity of DMRE will be deployed to fast-track the procurement of this additional power generation in 2023-2024 financial year. While the potential benefits of this procured additional power will be more easily reaped since ESCOM has appointed contractors for the provision of battery storage solution in terms of its flagship battery energy storage system project as part of the ANC-led government's effort to minimize the intermittent nature of renewable energies. Coal will not be clamped down, as the competitive of renewable energies is not yet sufficient to provide us with baseload energy. Honorable Malem. Renewable energy will increase generation and therefore supply, but lack the economies of scale to produce baseload supply. Of course, the DA and its lobbying partners of neoliberal attitude argue that the continued use of coal as a source of energy maintains the status quo rather than accelerating a just energy transition. On the contrary, the department does not effectively reject the just energy transition. Rather, the current electricity crisis leaves the department with less time for experimenting with renewable energies and incrementally scaling up their procurement, as they take approximately 18 months before they start supplying energy to the grid. And of course, Honorable Malem knows this. Clamping down on coal in favor of renewable energy sounds like an immature solution that the DA is proposing all the time. But of course, the use of coal would be promoted in a sustainable way that strikes a balance between economic development and environmental concerns. And therefore, carbon pricing implementation in the form of Carbon Tax Act would be part of this strategy to ensure that firms and consumers take the negative adverse externalities of coal into account in the future production, consumption, and investment decisions. More importantly, the technical implementation of Carbon Tax Act is easier since the ANC-led government already has one of the most loaded tax systems in the world, thanks to the South African Revenue Services. Chairperson, the department has recognized that the backlog of mining licenses is a major problem that must be addressed, as it contributes to the mining sector's poor performance, which has adverse implications for economic growth and inclusive development, especially in vulnerable communities such as Mpumalanga, Northwest, and the Northern Cape. Against the backdrop of concerns around the backlog of mining licenses, the department is in the process of procuring a new mining licensing system, with the implementation of the system starting in the 2023-2024 financial year, Honorable Lorima. Procuring a new mining license system could play an important role in reversing a dramatic decline of South Africa's mining sector ranking in Fraser Institute rankings. As expected, the DA attributes the mining sector's downward rather than stabilizing or improving performance in the Fraser Institute's ranking to the DMRE, which, according to the DA, has become a drag around the otherwise efficient mining sector through inefficient policies such as Black economic empowerment and industrialization through localization as outlined in the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. But it is short-sighted for the DA to link the mining sector's poor performance in the Fraser Institute's ranking solely to the department, especially given that most of the poor performance in the sector can be linked to recalcitrant giant mining houses that circumvent or marginalize the key interventions of the department aimed at spearheading structural transformation and progressive distribution of mineral benefits in the mining sector. That's what you were saying here, Honorable Lorima. You think this must be reversed because it benefits Black people, and therefore anything that has a Black person is linked to corruption, which is very wrong. For an example, the Gauteng High Court ruling that set aside some of the BEE provisions in the mining charter has weakened the ability of the department to intervene key in the structural transformation of the sector itself. And of course, the DA supports the ruling of the Gauteng High Court because the party called the DA is a lobbying vehicle used by uncooperating giant mining houses that prospered under apartheid to continue to hold sway in the democratic South Africa. Despite this ruling, the department has reviewed its policymaking and regulatory framework to effect and support structural transformation and the progressive distribution of mineral benefits. More specifically, the DMRE has taken the necessary steps to amend the regulations of Section 75, 76, and 77 of the MPRDA in the previous financial year to ensure that the attainment of the government's objective to redress historical socio-economic inequalities, broad-based economic empowerment, and the meaningful participation of the historically disadvantaged South Africans in the mining industry, while special emphasis will be placed on enforcing compliance with legislative amendments around the mining activities. Another growing concern that explains why South Africa's mining sector lags in the Fraser Institute's ranking is the politicized environmental justice organizations that have strong resistance against the mining minerals, especially fossil fuels such as coal and crude oil. Some of these organizations use their lobbying capabilities as special privilege, access to capital to influence respective landowners to successfully challenge plans to open new mines and expand the existing ones, irrespective of mechanisms in place to correct environmental externalities. Overall, despite these caveats, the DMRE is committed to establishing a framework for engagement with respective landowners, as well as broadening public consultations to promote participatory justice concerning issues of exploration. Chair, it would never be a debate in mining if Honorable Madokwe was not to bring the issue of the economic and political impacts of illegal mining, and this is correct. But she likes to give impression that the department is responsible for illegal mining and therefore should be held accountable. It's not the case. This impression is incorrect and is premised on the pessimism of the diagnosis and the optimism of the prescription. That's Antonio Grams. To be clear, the department, together with Mintech, has been involved in the rehabilitation of derelict and ownerless mines, since derelict and ownerless mines catalyze illegal mining, which is increasingly becoming harmful to the operational and licensed mines. I'm going to tell you now. The department is only allocated 140 million per financial year, which is not enough to rehabilitate 40 or still 40 shafts, which is what they are supposed to do. So the department needs approximately 49 billion to rehabilitate and close 6,100 mines that were mostly neglected by the apartheid government and former mine owners. Regardless of budget constraints, the department remains committed to rehabilitate and seal off these shafts identified as ownerless and derelict mines to help the improvement of the environmental health around such sites. And we know some of the people in this house are going around lobbying those environmental justice people to stop the development of the mining industry and the petroleum industry in the country. It's about time that at some point they will have to come out and be identified that they are economic sabotagers,
Thank you, Honorable.
because that's what they are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now recognize the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Thank you, Honorable Minister, over to you. However, just for fairness, without you telling me to say so, it was a general, no, don't interact with me, please. You are also humble requested in future, Honorable Minister, to sit at my right-hand side so that all of us, we confirm with the protocols of the House. But no, they will orientate you out after the debate. You may proceed, Honorable Minister.
No, thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson and honorable members. It's a pity that when you come to a budget debate, you're expecting to get ideas. Now, when you have an opposition party that doesn't make that contribution, you leave the debate poorer. You leave the debate poorer. Now, let me just take, because time is very limited, let me deal with few issues. You know, Honorable Kachalia is brandishing a book by the writer. Okay. And the Speaker of the DA talks to that issue. This is what they say, that Cold War ideology, which is outdated. Now, that means that 2 points of reference for the DA is the writer, a dentist who was given a task to undertake a heart surgery. So that's your point of reference. Your second one is Westhuizen, an apartheid spy who wrote a research that was not researched. And you use that as a point of reference. Now, I think it is quite important for us to deal with those issues. Oh, actually, I can tell you, I'm expecting more from the DA referred to those researches, because that's your point of reference. And actually, can I tell you what I'm reading of it? Let me tell you what I'm reading out of it, is that DA is too desperate to get into power, and it is showing us that it will take us back to the apartheid era. It is saying, yeah, it is. That's what it says. Now, if we look at that, it can be rubbish, but that's what you are sending as a signal. You know, one time we told you that,
Honorable members, don't drown the speaker, please.
we told you that if you take an alpha and you put an area that requires a fixer, you will not fix the problem. And that's the problem we're dealing with now. We're fixing it. And we're going to fix it, I can tell you. Now, That is the first thing. That is what I've read out of the DA contribution. Is that you have 2 points of reference, the Ranger and Oosthuizen. It's fine, good for you. I can wish you good luck. Secondly, ADDA, MPRDA must be done away. Mining charter must be cancelled. In other words, it means it must be free for all. There must be no governance. That's what they say. There must be no regulation. Now, the problem with the Democratic Alliance is that they are very strong at talking, very weak at listening. As a result of that, they don't hear anything that we say in the House because you don't listen. You howl back when we're speaking. Please correct that. Correct that. Now, you see, if you call it rubbish, that's an insult, Kevin. Okay. You're not Honorable Malam when you talk rubbish. Kevin, is disrespectful. No, it's disrespectful and actually rude. Okay. I'm just giving you that as a basic lesson. Now, before I sit down, let me acknowledge the Deputy Minister for talking about 2 important entities. One is NEXA, a very important entity which is dealing with nuclear research, and MINTEC, which is doing with mineral and mining research, doing good work. And I think we must have more time, either in the portfolio committee or other structures, to give more details of those, because those entities are doing good work for the country and for the department. So thank you very much for all your contributions. We'll take ideas where there are ideas. Where there are no ideas, we'll just ignore them. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, you are reminded that the debate on public service and administration, including National School of Government and Public Service Commission budget votes, will take place at 14 hours in this chamber. And the debate for government communications and information systems budget will take place at M46. That concludes, honorable members, the debate and the business of the plenary session. The plenary
Recording
session will
stopped.
rise.